meetings versus you've been here
Experience
too
is,
long with everything?
experience is a negative only if you don't have successes to point to.
Okay.
And so the best thing about being an incumbent is that you can point to things you've achieved. The worst thing about being an incumbent is you have to explain the things that haven't yet been achieved. I was talking to a reporter today who's doing a story in the LA mayor's race, and putting Kevin James aside for just a moment, you have three candidates, all of whom have significant experience in city government, all trying to run as outsiders. And on one hand, they all want to talk about their accomplishments because it gives them credibility. On the other hand, they realize that they're only identified with the city government, they're going to be blamed for a lot of the city's problems. So the key is, when Jerry Brown ran for governor, in his announcement video, he talked about having an insider's experience with an outsider's perspective. The language is a little bit clumsy, but the concept is a terrific one, and it points to the challenge that any incumbent faces. I've got experience, but I'm not done yet. And the way you're talking about continuing or building a bridge to the 21st century or morning again in America implies a work in progress. You don't ever want to say, I'm done. Hey, look at me, aren't I great? Hey, look at how far we've come. So let's go on to talk a little bit about message delivery. And again, next week we're going to talk about delivering a message to the news media, in 2 weeks. And then the final week of class we're going to talk about communicating a message online. But I want to start today by talking about delivering a message face-to-face, voter to person, talking directly to the voters in terms of canvassing. And this, once again, is why that interest group prioritization becomes so important. Because although it's theoretically possible to try to talk to every voter in your community, you want to start with those who are the most available to you. And an interest group is the most efficient way of identifying and talking to them. So you talk to the interest groups, but then you go out into the broader community. And you target, or you begin to talk to voters according to the priorities we set up under voter research. You prioritize geographically. You go to those precincts, you go to those neighborhoods, you go to those blocks where you know there are people who have been supportive of you or candidates like you in the past, who've been supportive of causes that are important to you, or geographic areas where you simply know a lot of people. That first concentric circle I was talking about earlier. You prioritize demographically through the kind of community groups, the type of voter groups you were talking about earlier. Some of them organize according to issues. A lot of them organize according to demographic characteristics. And then, as we talked about earlier, you communicate through interest groups by meeting with their leaders and asking them to allow you to come and talk to their organization. But when you actually do go face-to-face with the voter, whether it's at an interest group meeting, whether it's by targeting a particular block geographically, or targeting a particular voter or voting group demographically, there's three important steps to successful canvassing. Number one is start early. Start as early as humanly possible. I wouldn't necessarily start the day after the previous campaign because people need a little bit of time for detox. But you want to be the first person out knocking on doors and standing outside the supermarket. Number one, because it's a lot easier to help someone make up their mind than it is to help them change it. But also, even more significantly, because you have more time. And the more time you have, the more people you can talk to. And when you do that early canvassing, when you do that first door-to-door, you tell these people a little bit about yourself and your message. But this first time around, you ask them questions. The first time you meet with someone, whether it's an individual or a voter group, tell them about yourself, give them your message, as Paul and Eric were doing. But spend most of the time asking them questions. What's important to you? What worries you? What concerns you? What do you think about this? And you take really, really, really detailed notes. Because what that means is when you come back around the second time, not only are you not just reintroducing yourself to those people because you know who they are, you're targeting your message to them. Remember we talked about message targeting last week? How you don't change your message, you change the emphasis of it, depending on the voter and the voter group you're talking to. Well, as you go to each house, as you go to each voter group, you take away notes, saying this is the aspect of my biography that helps me form an emotional connection with this individual, with this group. This is the one of my 3 policy issues that's most important to them. And so when you come back to see them again later in the campaign, you don't just share with them your standard broader message. You talk to them about the things you learned from that first initial. And you might have 3 issues, but you spend 90% of your time talking about that one issue that really mattered to that voter. Remember when you went to that house on the corner and all they wanted to talk about was dogs? Well, you know what, you mentioned the trees, you mentioned the kids. You spend most of your time on the dogs. You remember that group that you went to talk? You remember that group that you went to talk to, where all of the parents sent their kids to charter schools? Well, that's the aspect of your biography, Paul, that you emphasize over any other. And so when you leave each house, when you leave each group, you write down what's important to them, so you know which aspect of your message to emphasize, what aspect of your message to target when you go back to them. And the more time allows you, either for you or for your supporters, the more often you go back. And maybe you can't go back 2 weeks later because you're in a different part of the community, but one of your friends can. And your friend says, hey look, I'm a friend of Eric's. I know he was by here a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to let you know, I brought by this information on the dog park and wanted to make sure you had it. I'm not going to waste your time talking to you about trees and traffic and kids, because you hate trees and traffic and kids. We'll work on that messaging a little bit, but you get the idea. And so over the course of a campaign, whether it's you, or your friends, or your campaign workers, or any of your saints, when they go back to that house, when they go back to that voter group, they know what to talk about. Because when you did that first canvassing, you found out what's important to them. So the first step is the early canvassing, which is delivering your message, but spending most of your time asking questions. Then as many times as you and your saints can do throughout the campaign, you keep going back. You keep asking questions, but you spend more and more time answering them, because you know what they're interested in. And the third and most important step is to go back at the end of the campaign. Not just on election day, but the day that absentee ballots go out. And you go to these people to remind them to vote. And you deliver not just a generic message saying voting is important because it's your civic responsibility. Not just vote because it's because you deserve a better school board. Vote for me because remember I've been here 7 times over the course of the campaign. Hey, listen. I want you to vote because I know how important that dog park is to you. I want you to vote because I know how important that college preparedness program is for you. You told me the very first time I came here last year that you were concerned about whether your daughter was going to be able to go to college in a few years. Now's your time to vote. And whether I get elected or not, says Paul, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure there's a college preparedness program in place. So first you ask, then you answer, and then you remind. And with the reminder, you're basically linking their vote, not just to your election, but to their most important policy outcome.
So when you're saying go back at the end of the campaign, are you saying like within a week's time out? And are you talking like literally door to door, or are you saying going back to those organizations that you've met with and doing like announcements?
I'm saying both. And obviously there's only so much time in a day, but to the extent that you can go back to groups, because again, this is the importance of interest groups, you can reach a lot larger number of people at once, and they're much more likely to vote because they care. So you go back to them, but to the extent that you and your supporters, and this is why your saints are so important. Saints aren't just reliable votes, they're surrogates. If you can only knock on doors on 4 blocks on a Saturday, because of everything else you have to do on the campaign, well, your 10 most loyal saints can each knock on 4 blocks themselves, and then you cover, and then you cover the whole, district. But whoever goes out, tell me your name again, I'm sorry?
Beth.
Say, listen, Beth is really hoping to come by here between now and the election. I just wanted to stop by and let you know, absentee ballots go out today. And if you really are still that concerned about the charter school and the school choice program, here's your chance to do something about it. So again, the voter groups come first because it's larger numbers of people and for all the other reasons we talked about earlier. But you can go in door to door. The more information you have on each house, the better you can connect with them. And what I said earlier, the second most important thing in any conversation is what I want. Well, here's where that comes to fruition. The person who lives behind that door knows what the most important thing about your campaign is. Maybe it's school choice, maybe it's accountability, maybe it's college preparedness, maybe it's dogs, maybe it's trees, maybe it's kids. They know what's most important to them. And so that's what you come talk to them about. Eric, here you
Real quick, are we getting to a point where there's software or apps available, not that I'm a user,
Yes.
but where you get a text message that, because I gave the campaign my phone number, and whomever took these detailed notes of the dog park, would we get to a point where I would get a text message on election day that says, go vote, remember the dog park kind of thing?
And we'll talk more about, yeah, absolutely, we'll talk more about this in the last class. Not only are there apps like that, there are much more advanced ones, in which every single one of your saints who takes notes after leaving a certain house can put those notes into a central database. So you know which 9 people on a block care more about dogs than kids.
And I could get
And then you try to
actual
explain
text
to them.
message or something at some
Sorry?
point? I could get an actual text message at some point in the future that says, just a reminder, go to...
Not only can you get a text message, but every single one of your saints, when they go out again, know exactly what to talk to those people about. They can know, you can keep track of who voted on election day, whose house needs to be visited a second time, who might need a ride to the polling places. We'll talk about this in great detail in the 5th week. All I'm trying to establish here is not so much the technology, it's just the concept. The more you learn on that first canvas, the more you can answer their questions when you keep going back, and the more you can relate their top priorities and their most important concerns to your vote by election time.